Developers are split on Epic Games Store exclusivity. We also have a weekend news that seems to have been dominated by studio changes, with many companies apparently scared of what the future holds for them. Activision are expanding, Bioware are pretty determined, and Double Fine have a little bit of uncertainty in their future. We also have new Death Stranding news courtesy of Hideo Kojima himself, and a bit of a public service announcement regarding the deadline of your Destiny 2 account. All of that and more on today's episode of the Roundup. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Roundup. There's a decent amount to cover today, but before we get started, as always, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that bell to let YouTube know that you enjoy our content. Okay, with that said, let's jump into it. Right, Bioware are not giving up on Anthem. Over the weekend, Bioware released a news blog detailing their, well, seemingly quite valiant efforts to keep on working on Anthem and Star Wars: The Old Republic. In the blog post, Casey Hudson, Bioware's general manager, stated that he, quote, believes in Anthem and would love to see its world grow, evolve, and thrive for years to come. I'm sure the customers who, spent money in that game and then were disappointed would like to see that evolve a little bit too. Hudson went on to say that to that end, the team are working on implementing more fundamental improvements to the game. And really, that's exactly what one would want to hear from Anthem. Not much right now, but fundamental improvements later. The current game is such a disaster in great part because of its fundamentals, such as loot being poorly conceived. The only way Anthem can be saved is just a fundamental rethink of the overall gameplay loop and the reward structure. Now, okay, they're going to have to combine that with an overhaul of mission design and enemy design and level design, so, if they do that, the game could be salvaged. And yes, I know I've just pretty much said, yeah, keep the combat and the flying and just redo most of the rest of it, but basically that's what happens when you release a game that's not ready for release. That's something where Bioware bear much of the blame for squandering so many years in the project, and where EA also have some blame for locking Bioware into that March release date, clearly knowing that the game was just not ready. Hudson also dropped some hints about upcoming new projects. He gave some details on Bioware's new offices as well, which apparently are custom designed from the ground up for the future of game development, and they certainly do look nice, and while many might scoff at that, I think it's undoubtedly important to invest in where your staff are working. After all, they're going to be paying out millions and millions in salaries, and a bad work environment is going to be a negative multiplier on the yield that you'll get from that investment. So even from a cold perspective, a good office makes sense. Then next, and in a similar vein to today's other video, some developers are split on Epic. So here's the situation. Team Meat's Tommy Refine stated that Epic's exclusivity deals are, quote, just a no-brainer, saying that fears over lost sales due to not being on Steam had been alleviated once he saw the numbers from Epic. He wasn't unaware of the concerns over Epic, though, having somewhat of a split opinion, thinking that some of the criticisms are reasonable while others aren't, and that he's sad that the more extravagant ones, such as the spyware allegations, are drowning out the more reasonable ones, which in his view seem to be just the quality of the store and its feature set and the exclusives. He could have worded his statement a bit more diplomatically, that's for sure, but I suppose he is right in saying that a lot of what people are saying regarding the spyware is actually just industry standard data collection that happens just about everywhere. You might be surprised just how much of your data is slurped up on a daily basis. So, we've got Tommy saying that the Epic deal makes financial sense, but we do also have a counterpoint with the Everspace 2 developers saying that while they talked about the Epic Store, they never seriously considered exclusivity, given how Everspace 1 really came together during its Steam Early Access period. And that's very notable because they're developing on the Unreal Engine, so their 5% engine licensing fee, that would have been waived if they went with Epic Storefront. And this highlights, I think, a difference in fundamentals here. Everspace 1 did well because of its close community collaboration. That's kind of what built it grassroots. Abandoning that would be bad business. Team Meat, however, they're a bit more traditional in terms of their model. They're also an indie darling who many people know, so you can see how the maths would add up differently for them. And that's really my point here. Different games are more or less reliant on that type of grassroots community. The attractiveness of each store, that's going to vary depending on each developer's situation. As an example, we're very community driven in what we're doing with game development, and just, it's spawning out of 2 YouTube channels. channels. So yeah, we're going to go on Steam because that just makes sense for us. Anyway, let's change gears and talk a little bit about Death Stranding. So this is some news straight from Hideo Kojima. The People's Weirdo hopped onto Twitter to let fans know that Death Stranding will have a very easy difficulty setting for those players who just want to see the story, or what Kojima himself calls non-game experienced Western fans. Kojima said that normally the difficulty settings would begin at easy, but he referenced the in-game appearances of stars such as Norman Reedus and Mads Mikkelsen, basically just saying that that's a lot of why he implemented the easier mode, or, got his team to do it. Kojima believes that the cast of Death Stranding may bring many non-gaming people over to the game, and that their lack of gaming experience could seriously impede their ability to enjoy the story, and that's why the very easy mode is going to exist. Kojima is certainly no stranger to easy difficulty settings, although it, does appear to be a bit more polite than the Metal Gear Solid 5 chicken hat this time. And next, we've got a surprise announcement from EA. Now, I know, surprise and EA, those words go together interestingly. They give a little bit of a feeling of dread, but this one is a little bit different. So, Ken Moss, EA's Chief Technology Officer, revealed that EA will be running a 2-week test of its cloud-based streaming service. Currently known as Project Atlas, the surprise is that the test is already underway for those who have signed up. In order to gain access, you've first got to sign up through EA's website, and then also sign up to Origin if you've not done so already. The games available for the cloud streaming test are FIFA 19, Need for Speed Rivals, Titanfall 2, and Unravel, and the titles will offer cross-play where supported, as well as transferable save data. Now, the 4 titles on offer, I think what you'll really notice is that they are just vastly different genres. They offer diverse forms of gameplay, so that, altogether it should give testers a pretty decent idea as to the current state of cloud gaming, at least in the EA test environment. Of course, cloud-based gaming certainly seems to, at least be an aspect of the future. Google certainly believe it'll be major with Stadia, but there are numerous obstacles to overcome when it comes to improving accessibility to this type of thing. I mean, the internet connections required to run Stadia in an enjoyable capacity, that's not a given, especially in rural areas, and many have also, myself included, questioned a lot of Google's claims, some of their, their bull shots, their marketing spiel. Yeah, and even their way of deflecting criticism. There's a lot of oddness going on there. There's also the possibility or fear that if cloud-based gaming becomes more prevalent, then yeah, we'll see the streaming wars coming up again with exclusives for different cloud gaming services, and even the death of game ownership itself. So there definitely are a lot of worries there with cloud streaming. I think fundamentally, if it's just, hey, access your Origin library from somewhere else, well, that could be a reasonable enough thing. An example of that being done ages ago is, of course, Steam in-home streaming, which is now, I think, Steam Link Anywhere, I believe that's what they call it, which, I mean, I've had good experiences with it, but I've also had very ropey ones as well. Still, perhaps 10 years in the future, if there's reliable 5G and we all have unlimited data caps, maybe something like this will be just a little bit more viable, but right now it's hard to tell. Then next up, we've got some interesting news from Double Fine, who may end up axing their publishing wing. In fact, it seems kind of likely that they will. So in June of last year, Double Fine was due to join the Xbox family. That decision, while generally very beneficial for Double Fine, does cast some serious doubts on its future as a publisher, as it would be a little bit odd for Microsoft to own a studio and then for that studio to have its own publishing wing. So speaking in an interview with Destructoid, Double Fine's CEO and president Tim Schafer stated that he's not quite sure if it made sense for Double Fine to operate as a publisher within another publisher, which does kind of make sense. He went on to admit that he's not sure as to how Double Fine will evolve in the future, particularly as its publishing activities are limited by being in the Microsoft sphere of influence. So a bit of uncertainty there, but it's worth noting that Schafer finished by saying that while Double Fine's publishing wing may indeed shut down in the future, the studio will continue to work with and help indie devs through events such as Day of the Devs. Then next, we've got another publishing-related story. So, Team 17, the Worms developer, of course, turned very big publisher now, has recorded a 97% jump in revenue for the first half of 2019, along with a 119% in gross profit, which is pretty darn good as a result. CEO Debbie Bestwick, in an interview with GamesIndustry.biz, confirmed that 80% of third-party revenue came from games that were co-developed by the internal studio at Team 17. One title highlighted by Bestwick was Hell Let Loose, in which Team 17's internal studio worked pretty darn closely with developers Black Matter. Now, Hell Let Loose was a big performer for Team 17 last year, and pretty much hit the top of sales charts upon its release. Then another big success for them was My Time at Porsche, which is a game where Team 17 actually oversaw the console version's development. Now, Now, you see, in cases like this, where a publisher is investing a lot of their own development resources, it's pretty common for them to see a larger percentage of the returns. And I think that explains a lot of why these very high-performing games ended up getting a lot of money in for Team 17. So it's no surprise that collaboration is, according to Debbie Bestwick, at the heart of their publishing division. In her interview with GamesIndustry.biz, Bestwick had this to say, that Team 17 aren't the same as every other publisher out there. We enhance the quality of games that come to the market. She then went on to state that Overcooked 2 was made in the Team 17 studio in close conjunction with the team at Ghost Town Games who, quote, could sit in the creative capacity where they could check we weren't doing anything wrong. Now, it's certainly different from what you see with many publishers. It's not ideal for some devs, but it's a fantastic model for other devs, and I've personally talked to devs who have had experiences like this with publishers who have worked out very well, and I've also seen some of the opposites. So it's clearly something where it's just about what works for the game, what works for the team, and in this case it certainly has resulted in quality games for customers. The future here is actually looking so bright for Team 17 that they've got a target list of studios that they hope to acquire, but Bestwick is careful to not let the studio's ambitions spiral out of control. The results are good and they have the IP to make things even better, so watch this space for what's to come, I suppose. Then finally, let's round off the news segment of this video with Quickfire. Okay, Destiny 2. So the player-facing part of Bungie's divorce from Activision is actually, well, coming up now. Bungie are due to migrate the PC version of Destiny 2 from Activision Blizzard's Battle.net client over to Steam. This means that if you're a PC player and you wish to retain things like your progress, your license, your silver, and things like that, then you've got to move house and you've got to use the account migration that has been set up ahead of the release of the game's Shadowkeep expansion on October 1st. Thankfully, Bungie are doing their best to make it a smooth transition, and they developed a guide that players can access through their website. We then have an Activision expansion, as one of their studios has announced the opening of a new office. So Sledgehammer Games have announced a new office opening up in Australia. The studio is of course an important one for Activision because of its historical ties to the Call of Duty franchise, with them now supporting Treyarch in Call of Duty 2020. That's a rather dramatic situation that we covered a while ago, where Sledgehammer and Raven seemingly had the reins taken off them after initially troubled progress. Anyway, the new office has job listings. For an example, one of them is a senior director of product development, and it's actually mentioned that this candidate will, quote, oversee internal development of a major game mode for our upcoming AAA title. So I've got to wonder if that's zombies or maybe a continuation of Blackout. But yes, overall they're expanding, and it seems pretty clear that Activision are further investing in the Call of Duty franchise. And with the news finished, let's talk a little bit about upcoming releases. You guys seem to like this segment last week, so we're back doing it again. Celeste's final DLC, Celeste 9 Farewell, is now also out on all platforms. The DLC was unveiled in December and was promised to be very hard, which is either an exciting or terrifying thing, depending on how good you are at Celeste. The DLC is a free download that brings with it over 100 new levels, a suite of new mechanics, and 40 minutes of new music. Then, as a little bit of a side story, the team behind the game have also announced they're forming a proper studio with an office and everything that goes by the name of Extremely OK Games. So overall, it's very nice to see, just to see those people have a good story. We then have Gears 5 officially announcing on Xbox One and PC this week. Of course, it was available a little bit earlier through Games Pass. It seems to be pretty successful so far, looking at the initial reviews, so that's definitely nice to see. There seems to be a greater emphasis on the characters and story development, and then also diverse environments and weapons. So yeah, I actually may end up playing that. Then releasing alongside Gears 5 is Greedfall, a multifaceted story-driven RPG revolving around exploitation, colonization, and a ravaging plague from spiders. The combat seems to have a lot of diversity and allow for a lot of build experimentation. I'm a little bit skeptical given the sort of unbalanced history of that dev's production, but this certainly looks like it's a step above the quality of many of their past projects, so could be worth a look. Then releasing at the end of this week is the Nintendo Switch exclusive mech 'em up Demon X Machina. Dealing with an artificial intelligence uprising following a catastrophic event known as the Moonfall, the gameplay is pretty darn stylish, fast-paced, looks like a lot of fun, so yeah, could be a really fun one actually. Then to round off the big names for this week, we've got Borderlands 3, which is coming to us this Friday, releasing on PS4, Xbox One, and PC via the Epic Games Store. And I mean, yeah, it's a loot shooter. I remember playing Borderlands 2, not really enjoying its gunplay and thinking the jokes were really painfully bad. I actually like the first one quite a bit, but I'm just not at all interested in Borderlands 3, so it's a skip for me, but I'm pretty darn sure it won't be a skip from a lot of other people because it's a very hotly anticipated game indeed, so I'm sure a lot of people will have a lot of fun with that game. Though, of course, it's still 6 months until you actually get it on Steam, which is a little bit unfortunate, so it'll be very interesting to see how many people actually hold off to get this game on their platform of choice. Anyway, there you go, that's it for another episode of the Roundup. Let me know what you think about everything we covered in the comments below, and with that, I will see you next time.